I think I only physically have one single book that I read this month, so that's an oops on my part. This month was a series month to a huge extent, and so I figured I'll kind of order the reading wrap up in some series that I read. But just to start out, I read 22 books in February, which definitely sounds like a lot, but you'll also see why that is when I tell you which books I read. And that was 6,567 pages. As you can see, the moods are different, honestly, than what I usually read, with the number one being lighthearted, which is kind of cute, but then mysterious, emotional, and then kind of diverse for the rest of them, honestly, which I like. I like diversity. As far as pace goes, 45% of the books I read were fast, 45% were medium, 9% was slow. And the length, and this is part of how I read so many too, is that half of the books were under 300 pages and then half were between that 300 and 499, and none were 500 plus. Mostly fiction, 91%, one nonfiction. I can't even think what that was, to be honest. I'm really working to think about it too. I have no idea. Genres, the number one is children's, and that is because of a series that I read, and then mystery, thriller, crime, which is a whole different series. The majority of books this month were audio, which was 68%, and then 32% was print. I really found that I enjoyed this month sitting in Zach's little gaming chair playing Mario Kart and listening to an audiobook. Average star rating was 3.74 stars, which I feel like is not too bad. For the most part, I genuinely enjoyed most of the books that I read this month. There were just some that brought the average down. And then you can see the page breakdown of like when I read however many pages. In the past, I've ordered the books in like highest rated to lowest rated, or lowest rated to highest rated. In the future, I'll probably do like, oh, just the order I read them in. And then this one, I'm kind of just gonna do like the little singletons and then the series. So this month, I read X's and O's by Amy Lee. And I read this because there was an X's and O's readathon that was taking place with some of the people that I subscribed to on YouTube, and that was their buddy read, but I didn't actually get it from the library until afterwards, so I just listened to it. It is a romance, and I feel like it's a pretty just typical romance, but it follows the main character, who is both a nurse and also a bookstagrammer, which is kind of cool, and it's cool to see like that in a book. But she's been broken up with, I think 10 times total, and she starts deciding that she's gonna go on this little like quest to meet up with all of her exes and see if there's any romance worth rekindling from all of her exes. And the whole time that she's doing this, there's this budding romance with her roommate, who's this like hunky firefighter man. And so I'm sure you know where it's going, and it's not surprising at all. I ended up rating this 2.25 stars because it was fine, but it was like just fine. I didn't hate it. I didn't necessarily dislike it strongly, but I wouldn't recommend it. I think number one, because I didn't like the main character. I just felt like she was cheesy. And not saying like if this person were real that I wouldn't like them, but just reading it, I wasn't all down for her. And then two, I feel like there needs to be like something fun in a romance is what I'm learning. There needs to be something that sets it apart from the rest, because this one just didn't feel set apart from the rest. It felt very average. The Three Lives of Alex St. Pierre by Natasha Lester is one of my most anticipated reads, I feel like, and I read it as a new release too. It's been published in Australia for a couple months, but it just recently published in the United States. Love Natasha Lester. She did it again with this one. It was not a full 5 stars, though it was close to. I ended up giving it a 4.75 because it included war strategy and was slow in some ways, but not necessarily like slow and I'm soaking up the environment and like getting to know the characters a little bit more like I felt like it was in The Riviera House, which is the other book that I read by her. And so that's why I didn't get the full 5 stars. I do like The Riviera House better, but I also do really like The Three Lives of Alex St. Pierre. In this one, we're following Alex, if that's not obvious by the title. And this is post-World War II Paris, and she gets a job with Christian Dior, and they're doing their first, like, what's it called? The Dior Mansion? It's like as he's up and coming as a designer, and she gets a job with him. And we get both this timeline, and then we also get a previous timeline because during the war, she was a spy for the US and made some shady connections, and they're alluding to the fact that, like, she may have done something that led to a very negative outcome. And as she's living her new life after the war and like, working with Christian Dior and everything like that, there is a character from her past life that is like showing up and threatening her, but she's not exactly sure who it is. So it gets to be a little bit mysterious, but then with Natasha Lester, she creates such beautifully complex characters that feels like they're your friend, but in the way of a deep friendship where it's like, I know this person and I know why they feel the things that they feel. You know, like I know how they're gonna act in situations. Even if they're acting kind of messy, I understand why they're acting a little messy right now. She makes great characters, and Alex is such a strong female lead, but like in a believable way. Like it doesn't give girl boss at all. It gives a very believable, likable, realistic, strong female lead. And if you're someone who doesn't read historical fiction that often, but you're looking like, oh, do I want to read one of these books? I would suggest The Riviera House before this one because I think The Riviera House is closer to contemporary. It has like a contemporary timeline in it too. But if you're comfortable with historical fiction, then I would definitely recommend starting with The Three Lives of Alex St. Pierre. We did get a 5-star this month, which is big because I think there might have just been one if I remember correctly. And that was River Sing Me Home by Eleanor Shearer. Also a new release. I was one of the very first people to get it from the library. But in this book, we follow Rachel, who after the emancipation of slaves I believe she starts in Trinidad, her owner, the owner of the plantation, announces that just because there's the emancipation doesn't mean that his slaves get to leave, and that instead now they're apprentices, but it's still gonna be the same day today. And that's her tipping point where she decides to run away. And her quest, I guess, for running away is that she's going to find her children, because she has 5 children who have been taken from her at various times of her life and their life in different ages. And she doesn't necessarily have any leads to begin with of how to find her children, but she just knows that she needs to know either what happened to her children or meet up with them now. And I like the ambiguity of her quest. Some of this book definitely does require a bit of suspension of reality, but kind of in like a spiritual destiny type of way, which I don't know if that makes any sense as I just said it. It's like strong coincidences happen, you know, but not strong enough where you're like, oh, that would never happen in real life, but strong enough where you're like, heck, maybe this is like fate, like her destiny. The people that you meet along her journey, seeing her change and her changing desires and end goal as the book goes on is really incredible. This one also obviously is historical fiction. It takes place in the 1830s, I believe, but it is so beautiful, and I would recommend it for anyone. I didn't specifically read it because it was Black History Month, but it definitely fits well into Black History Month, having read it in February. But I did read it because Books and Lala does her Buzzword-a-thon yearly challenge, and for February it was a verb, and so River Sing Me Home, that was a verb, so it fulfilled that challenge for me. And now we get into the series, 3 Singletons. So this month I listened to the entire Ramona Quimby series, which I was calling it my inner child work because I was sitting playing Mario Kart and listening to Ramona Quimby, whereas like growing up, Ramona Quimby, I had the cassette tapes and it would be like what I listened to as I went to bed at night, and so I hadn't re-listened to them since, but there were some scenes that I knew so vividly. Like I wouldn't say I necessarily had them memorized, but it's like as I got to this scene, I swear it was inner child work. If you don't know Ramona, it's worth looking into the books because it's kind of like Junie B. Jones, but a little bit older, where it's just a girl protagonist who is growing up and being a child, but written for children. Iconic. It really is iconic. They're by Beverly Cleary, and there's 8 books total. I listened to all of them in less than a day. However, it was a long day. Like I was only listening to Ramona that day. We have Beezus and Ramona, Ramona the Pest, Ramona the Brave, Ramona and her father, Ramona and her mother, Ramona Quimby age 8, and Ramona Forever, and Ramona's World. I don't think you need to rate Ramona. I think I gave them all 4 stars on Goodreads because it's just like, yeah, those are good books. But I feel like what is the best about them is my connection to my childhood. I also listened to 5 books in the Will Trent series, which is a series that I have continued to keep mentioning on this channel. And the best way I can describe it is that it's like Criminal Minds, but in book form. And so honestly, whether this is good or bad, I don't even remember all of the cases that these books necessarily went into, like the specific, you know, crimes that they're solving or whatever. But I think if you are looking for Criminal Minds in book form, then the Will Trent series is a good place to start by Karen Slaughter. They're not the best, they're not perfect at all, but they've just become like content that I am consuming. And so this month I read Fallen, which is the 5th book that I gave 3 stars to. I read 5.5, like there's a little novella between 5 and 6, which is called Snatched, that I gave 3.5 stars to. Criminal, which is number 6, 2.75 stars. Unseen, which is number 7, 3.25 stars. And The Kept Woman, which is number 8, which is 3.25 stars as well. And then I stopped at that point, because even though I've enjoyed listening to them, the next ones in the series I have physically, so I feel like, and I own them, so I feel like I need to read them physically. Oh, these were the nonfiction ones. So I mentioned March book 1 in my January wrap up because I wish that I could do the whole trilogy in 1 month just to make it easier, but I couldn't. But John Lewis has a trilogy of graphic novels that he helped create. Andrew Aiden, I believe, is the guy who like does the graphic novel part of it, but it's an autobiography from John Lewis, but they're graphic novels, and there's 3 of them. And so I read the first one in January, and then I read the second and the third one in February. They're really interesting. Again, a good trilogy for Black History Month, but expand that beyond February and pick them up now. It obviously is heavy content. They don't shy away from the violence or anything that John Lewis was victim to or witness of, but that's true to the historical time period of the 1960s, the civil rights. And what I really like about the trilogy too is that it's not only John Lewis's story, like it is his story, but the context in which he's telling it to us is at the 2009 inauguration of Barack Obama. So the first Black president is being inaugurated, and it's like John Lewis is about to attend the inauguration, and he's like thinking back in his memories to basically all of that he has gone through that has helped pave the way to the moment that was leading up to the first Black president of the United States. There's even a page, I wish I still had them so I could show it to you, but there's a page where it's a sketched rendition of Barack Obama hugging John Lewis and saying like, thank you, I couldn't have done it without you, John. It was good. It was good. Does this count as a book making me cry? I didn't cry when I was reading it, but there's just so many monumental, super critical people within the civil rights movement, and like people in present day now too, that don't always get the limelight that they deserve and aren't always acknowledged for the parts that they played in the path. Because obviously in John Lewis's story, Martin Luther King Jr. is mentioned, Malcolm X is mentioned, but the story is John Lewis's because he did so much himself, along with the help of his whole community around him and all the people that he knew. And so I really enjoy that his books are not only getting to show his story, but also he mentions so many of the other characters and what they did, like whether it was a school teacher who had like this super brave moment, you know, in a march or in a protest, or even children who were victims of like church bombings and mentioning them by name. They're super important historical books with a twist of their graphic novels, which I just feel like makes it's so cool. Read those books. Now we have the one single book that I have physically, A Court of Thorns and Roses. I don't need to get too deep into it because there is a whole entire reading vlog that is on this channel. The most recent video posted was me reading this book, and I actually just got, here I'll show you actually, in the mail. The second one came today, A Court of Mist and Fury, which is a prettier color than I ever thought it was going to be. Oh, it is a little bit damaged. Barnes & Noble, cutting up my book. But now I own the whole series, which means that there will be more reading vlogs to come. It's not that, it's like, oh, so good, I can't wait to get into it. Someone commented that they think of ACOTAR as beloved trash. That's what it's turning into for me, beloved trash. Do I think it's a great book? No. Did I really enjoy reading it? Yeah, I did. But go watch that vlog if you're more interested, because I go like 35 minutes into detail there. Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun was number 3 in Finlay Donovan, and it's the most recent release too. I ended up giving it 4.75 stars. I think it was a good continuation of Finlay Donovan. If you love Finlay, then perfect, you get more of her. It is like a different setting and it's a different setup than the previous ones, but I think that was good because I think having, you know, the same thing for a third time would be kind of slow. There's a slow burn romance going on in it that I think was actually executed very well because I didn't notice how much I was rooting for the slow burn until it just like killed me, where I was like, what? We're still not saying we love each other yet. Finlay Donovans are always quick reads. They're lighthearted despite being like killings and murders and mysteries and mob. And if you liked the first two, I think you'll definitely like the third one as well. And if you didn't like the first two, why? I read Heartstopper Volume 3, so the third volume in the Heartstoppers, of course. It was all right. Again, just a continuation. I feel like that's the thing with this like series month, is that all of the books take place like in the context of their series. I think it'll be interesting once I read Heartstopper Volume 4, because then I can kind of rate them as a whole. I feel like it's hard to rate each individual book or anything because they all take place within each other. I think my like for them have been going slightly down as I've been getting in, not like in a bad way, but just that the first one I believe was my favorite, and then comes the second one, and then the third one's my least favorite so far. But that doesn't mean it's bad. Like they're all volumes of the same story. So I think volume 4 is ready for me to pick up on the library. So that'll be good. Oh, and then this one was bad. Kristen Hanna, if you're watching this video by any chance, click off please. I read Fly Away, which is the sequel to Firefly Lane, which Firefly Lane also became a Netflix series, but it was this really beautiful story, like yes, sappy, yes, emotional, but overall this really beautiful story of Tully and Kate, who became best friends when they were 15, and it follows them through the decades, going through all different stages of life, still being best friends. You know, turmoil occurs, but like their relationship is strong, all of that. It was cute. The Netflix series is the same. So I didn't look too much into the sequel, but I was like, oh, a sequel, fun. And it was not good. It was not anything similar at all to Firefly Lane, like at all. Don't expect you're getting the same vibes. Don't expect you're getting the same characters. They claim to be the same characters, but they're just whole different people, I think. If there is even one single content warning, trigger warning that you try to stay away from, don't read the book, because somehow it includes every single thing. I put it all in a text whenever I was reading it because I needed to express all that was going on to my friend. If you don't want Firefly Lane to be spoiled for you, I'm gonna put a spoiler bar up for Firefly Lane. If you've already read Firefly Lane and you're thinking about reading the sequel, I just say don't read the sequel, and you can definitely watch the spoiler part, because don't read the sequel. Firefly Lane is a sweet, kind of feel-good story spanning decades of a best friendship between Tully and Kate, from when they're like 15 to when they're like 45, and Kate is the conventional good girl with stable family, and Tully is the edgy one whose mom is addicted to drugs and is a 70s hippie. That's our summary of Firefly Lane. None of this I consider a spoiler because surprisingly it doesn't actually matter that much, and also please never read the sequel. In the sequel it's giving backstory to the mom, among other things, but the last half of the book so far is from the mom's point of view, and we learn that she was such a bad mom to Tully because she was SA'd by her dad when she was a kid, and then she was institutionalized, and then they did electroshock therapy, and then she was 16 and pregnant, and surprise, Tully is actually mixed race, and then Tully's mom accidentally kills her own dad, which I guess then is why then she grew up and had an addiction to drugs is because all of that happened. I said, like, how are we doing every trauma possible? And don't worry, because if we maxed out on the trauma meter with Tully's mom, we actually get the stories of both Tully and also of Kate's daughter, what's her name, Mara, in present day, which includes Tully, panic attacks, sleeping medication addiction. She's currently in a coma after a car crash and is fighting for her life in the hospital. Kate's daughter, goth and homeless, these two attributes are always mentioned together. Self-harm, eating disorder, attempts on her own life, predatory older goth boyfriend. And this is all in one book. I said, I'm imagining this as a Walmart version of A Little Life, but I've never read A Little Life, so I don't know that for sure. And what's wild is that Kristen Hanna's a good author. Like, she writes good books, but I think she went out of her comfort zone for this one, and I think maybe she should have stayed in her comfort zone. Because how do we just put so much in a book whenever the first one was like emotional and sweet and loving, and then all of a sudden we're fighting for our lives after a coma, and also electroshock therapy, and accidentally killing your own father, and being goth and homeless with a predatory older goth boyfriend? Anyways, I gave it 1.25 stars, and the 0.25 was just out of pity, I think. Okay, spoiler section has ended if you didn't want to know all that went on. I feel like there's always one book every month that is a miss. Somehow that doesn't feel like 20 books. Let me check and make sure I actually talked about all the ones I read. Yeah, I did. What a weird reading month. I feel like it was good though, overall, especially with my series. They were fun. It seems like the regular on this channel has become like reading wrap-ups at the end of the month and then one reading vlog during the month. Maybe that'll continue. We'll see. But subscribe to my main channel if you want more regular videos, because they definitely get more regular videos over there, being the main channel and all. But I love everyone who's subscribed to this channel, and I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time.